Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi, and this week in my Friends Eye on China column, I analyzed a topic that has been getting a lot of attention globally, and we keep hearing that there is a new world order that now is being established, and specifically by China. China is the one who is actually altering and establishing a new world order where it's actually playing the central role. In fact, the New World Order is a phrase that has been grabbing a lot of attention, specifically for the past couple of years. And in fact, whenever we talk about the New World Order, there is just one country that comes to the mind, and that is China. China has been at the center of this conversation and this debate, but um, several developments have taken place that have given rise to the number of discussion that we are seeing online right now. And of course, this has very much to do with the US China trade and tech war, as well as how China is dealing with the US and then projecting itself. But then in the past couple of months, we are seeing that the talks are now kind of becoming a reality, at least from the perspective of the international media, and also when the world leaders talk about China. But recently, in China, in Tianjin, China hosted the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, uh, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was also present, and that got a lot of attention, which I discussed in my last few columns. But then at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, there was this launch of the Global Governance Initiative. As in, this is not something that is new. China has been, and especially Xi Jinping has been launching, establishing a number of initiatives, and now we have a number of initiatives that have been launched by China, and this is just one in the series of such initiatives. But then just after the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, there was this so-called victory parade, the 93rd military parade that happened in Beijing, and it was attended by over 25 world leaders, including the leaders that were there for Shanghai Cooperation Organizations, and then there were additional leaders from North Korea, from Central Asia, from Southeast Asia, and in fact, there were officials and ministers from some European countries as well. So it also so the world attention was on China when this military parade was happening, and of course there was an unveiling of a lot of new weapons, equipment that actually made this argument much more indispensable. But now the question is very obvious. Is China really trying to shape the global order? Do we have evidences for that? So now, if we just talk about the newly launched initiative, the Global Governance Initiative, um, so in Chinese official language, this is about building a more just and reasonable global governance system. And it's of course about the language that we have seen in the Chinese discourse, in the Chinese official discourse, that this is about fostering a community with a shared future for mankind. Of course, this is all ambitious, and this is also something that's not new. But maybe even like China wants to rewrite the rules of the world, this is something that perhaps we have evidences to say, to assert such an affirmation. But if we look at the Chinese language sources, the narrative is not the same. The story isn't so simple, and in fact, it's very much in contrast with what the Western media has been talking about. China led, China established New World Order. So, in the Chinese discourse, instead of tearing down the system, a number of analysts from China say that Beijing wants to defend, adjust, and guide the existing international order. But of course, with China at the center, with China at the core of the discussion and the world order. So the real question isn't whether China wants a new world order or not. In my opinion, and on the basis of the Chinese discourse that I've dug into, I think the real question is that whether it's just about uh, altering the world order where its interests are best suited, or it actually wants to play a much much bigger role that's actually equal to having a new world order where the US space US place is actually diminished and China actually replaces the United States. So, in this context, Chinese experts are saying that China isn't really trying to overturn the global system. And in fact, there was this study that I came across that was from Runman University that showed that China looks at global politics through history, ideology, and systemic factors, and it's just not about economics or military power. And this is something that is very common when we talk about China. So, in fact, Chinese discourse is a little bit different from how the Western media is analyzing China at the core of the altered world order. So, in Chinese perspective, the goal is to protect the system and gently steer it in ways that reflect Chinese values. So, to put it simply, I would say that what the Chinese discourse is hinting it at that there should be an adjusted world order with Chinese characteristics. So basically, with China at the core. So what I've also analyzed is that there are three factors that actually shape that are actually shaping the discourse on the world order with China at the core. So some of the justification that we have seen, and also for the warning US influence, is that there needs to be historical rectification. We have heard about the century of humiliation, and the history needs to be rectified, and then the injustice that China has gone through, it needs to be addressed. So this is the first factor where which plays an important role when we talk about the world order with China at the core. So China frames its rise as correcting long-standing Western dominance as well as long-standing injustices, which China was at the center of. China was the biggest victim, and this was the official as well as the um, strategic community discourse on Chinese place in the world order, not just in the contemporary time, but since time immemorial. But then, if we talk about the contemporary um, politics and how China views itself, Chinese discourse hints at China being a very capable and stabilizer power to actually lead the world order. Why? Because it's just not about being an economic power. It's just not about having the most superior military, but it's a mix of being an economic powerhouse, having military capabilities, but this should be complemented with the technological strength that China has. So, a combination of economic, military, and technology is something that only China is offering right now, and that is unmatchable. And a lot of other countries would take a lot of time to reach at a level where the Chinese are right now. But the third factor is, and this is something that we do not really see outside China, that Chinese discourse actually is hinting towards having a multipolar world order. Of course, what we have also heard specifically in the regional context is that what China wants is unipolar Asia but multipolar world. And I think this is very much in alignment with what I have seen in the Chinese discourse. And much of the internet and the scholarly community is saying that China does not want to be the ruler of the world order. It doesn't want to rule the world alone. It wants a central role, but it wants other countries such as European countries, India, and also some part of Southeast Asia to play an important role in this more connected multipolar world. But of course, the crux of this argument is also that only China can lead this multipolar world. So even if countries are playing a bigger role, but no matter what, China would still be at the front, and China would still be the leader of that multipolar world. And to I have also looked at the empirical evidences in Chinese discourse to kind of substantiate the 3 point that I have out with. So for the historical injustice, there are commentators like Cao Chiao, who is a commentator for People's Daily. He actually calls China an unwavering defender of the international order, and he offers that what we how China could be a defender of the international order is primarily through the old ancient Chinese wisdom, so it could actually make the world a better place. And then another scholar, Shan Yi, who is a prominent scholar from Fudan University, he says that the military parade, that's of course to highlight the so-called Japanese atrocities against the Chinese. So he actually says the military parade shows China's strength and gave it a new source of power to guide the world forward. And then I think there is this consensus about this in the strategic community, as there's another scholar, Fan Yonpang, who also calls China the cornerstone of the world peace and its capability stabilizing an unpredictable system, specifically under US President Donald Trump. And on platforms like Paito, there are commentators who note that China's influence comes not just from the military but also tech, science, and trade. And then, of course, there is a combination of soft power and hard power, which actually makes China the best suited country to lead the world order, the altered world order. So China keeps stressing that it is not going to do it alone. And the third factor that I talked about, the multipolar leadership, and in fact, they also talk about Japan playing an important role in this context, with which they do not really have the most cordial relations. So, in this area, Europe, Japan, India, they all matter. And the countries from the developing world are gaining influence from Chinese perspective, and China is pushing for cooperation, resilient supply chains, and partnerships over dominance. So, of course, this is also a dig at the US. So, even if there's an altered world order with China at the center, what they believe is it is going to be a totally different world order that we are now seeing under the US dominance. And in other words, I would say that it's actually about challenging the West led order without really trying to bulldoze it. At least this is the narrative that they're trying to project. And some of the Chinese analysts also note that uh, how many shifts we have seen since the Second World War. And then China and the global South are now rising, giving countries more say in shaping global rules and initiatives such as GGI, GCI. So, all of these are just a blueprint for stabilizing the world, and they are just guidelines for the global governance that are going to be beneficial for China and for other countries um, alike. But across the board, the analysts cast China as the central global player. And in this context, a scholar from Wuhan University, Hu Tekun, who says that China offers a new model for the world at a historical crossroads. And the Chinese dream should be adopted that signals the vision for a more Eastern civilization world, East focused world. So I think the idea is that the American dream should now be replaced by the so-called Chinese dream. So I think the consensus is that it isn't just about military or economic power. China wants to be seen and projected as a responsible stakeholder, a stabilizing and innovative power. And of course, we have seen after the um, innovations in the field of AI, China has projected itself to be also taking over the United States in the field. And then projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, BRICS, SCO, and in fact the a couple of months ago, China established this international mediation code in Hong Kong, which is, of course, in total in competition to the International Court of Justice. It all shows that China is blending tradition, the old ancient wisdom, Chinese wisdom, with modern approaches. And it is now trying to offer alternatives rather than a world that is being dominated by China. At least this is the projection. So now the takeaway from all this is that according to Chinese discourse, this isn't about tearing down the global system. It's about putting China at the heart of an evolving order. And it's about China defending it, energizing it, and guiding it forward. So, in their perspective, this is not a sudden shakeup, but it is about offering a steady leadership in a multipolar world, with China playing a stabilizing central role. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.